This is a cooperative adaptation of the John Carpenter movie with the same name, which if you're not familiar with takes place in a world where New York was turned into a giant prison where all the most dangerous criminals are kept and they all have life sentences because once you enter this prison, you never leave. And there's no guards or anything. This whole prison's just allowed to live in whatever society they create for themselves. Which, spoiler alert, is not a great one. But the president's plane was hijacked and flown into this prison, so it's your job to try and get him out. And players will be able to choose different characters from the movie, each with their own special ability. And although the game is cooperative, it does get progressively more difficult, and at a certain point it might make more sense to try and save yourself than to try and work with the others to try and save the president. And once it does reach this point, players will have their own personal objective that if they're able to fulfill it, they will escape the prison on their own, leaving all the players behind to lose the game. And of course there will be different types of enemies that will show up out on the board. There's basic prisoners that start out weak, but they do get stronger in numbers and can level up as the game progresses. And there are the more stronger bosses that have their own stats and special abilities. And combat in this game is done using cards, but there will be a cost to get those cards back later. On a player's turn, there's going to be two different phases. There's the hero phase, where you're going to be playing your cards to perform actions, and you'll be revealing any tiles as you move around the board, revealing different roadblocks, enemies, or events as you're trying to search for a specific tile that is the location of the president. Players will start with all their cards available to them in their hand, but as you're spending them, they are exhausted and you're going to have to perform an action in order to get them back. But each action is also going to create a certain amount of noise, which is going to move up the noise tracker, which is relevant for the next phase, which is the city phase. And the city phase always begins with revealing a card from the city deck, and every one of these cards is going to have a value on it which represents a certain amount of noise, and if your noise tracker is equal or above that value, then you're going to resolve the events of that card. And this can move around or upgrade enemies, cause different events that can be harmful or beneficial to the players, or even advance time, where you're going to be drawing from the time deck, which eventually will be the end trigger for the game, but can also cause other events, and of course players lose the game if the time deck runs out before they're able to rescue the president. And there's a few different bosses that players can mix into the game, changing up the whole feel of the game because each boss is going to come with their own deck, which is going to be drawn and dictate how the different enemies interact with the players, what sort of abilities they have, and what sort of strength and weaknesses they have. And these cards don't just affect the boss, but they'll also affect how all the enemies interact and behave on the board, creating a lot of variability from game to game. And if players are able to escape the prison with the president, or escape on their own if things get a little too hairy, then the players or that player will win the game.